Some people, I think, learn better through short interval training. So this is the difference between interval training and long distance training, or like cross training and going deep in one thing. I think there's benefits to all of them, and only you can determine what's going to work for you. However, it's been my experience that sometimes when we take time away from one practice, what ends up happening is we integrate that. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they say that when you're in your REM state, you actually integrate your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So as a result of that, you should have better access to it in terms of unconscious competence, which would increase your flow state access to it, whether or not you're present to the incremental improvements. It can also change your experience in ways that you can't imagine because as we were discussing, there's pushing and pulling and tugging and stopping and starting and tiny little subtle manipulations that you're feeling with your gunslingers. I mean, it's true with every move. And as a result, you have developed some awareness in your hands, in your manipulation, that will become relevant in other tricks. It's just who can say how they will become relevant. I mean, I imagine what you've learned with your gunslingers will be really relevant for things like upstalls or flat stalls across, across the top this way, because it's super subtle. And like a lot of, I notice for myself when I'm doing flat stalls like this, I have a hard time keeping them straight this way. So like you're tugging and your subtle pushing and pulling is going to affect the plane in a much more significant way than you can imagine until you start playing with it. I don't think there's a single right answer, and I'd say never underestimate the value of fucking around. This is just never underestimate the value of that. And for myself, to prevent boredom, I like to have a cadre of things that I'm working on. Sometimes it's in the same family. Of course, this also speaks to what elements of it you're working on, because you can be just working on drilling something to be improving your technique. You could be working on something where you're trying to integrate how you access it in flow. You could be working on how you're stylizing it, because you can have a move, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have like your own personal style associated with how you're doing it. And if the goal is just to manipulate objects, okay, that's one thing. But if you're trying to do a performance, what's really relevant is you doing the move like you. As I like to say, anyone can do the weave, but only you will do the weave like you. Anyone can do it a gunslinger, only you will do a gunslinger like you. So whatever the move is, your style is, I think, more relevant than the actual technique itself, because in the end, the technique is just a technique. But from a performance perspective, it's all about the style and like your signature that you put on it. Would I be working on one move at a time or more than one move? I have sessions where I do both things. So I might go into a session where I'm just diving deep for like, so I have this concept called fits, where I recommend people, so a fit would be this idea of, for a short, concentrated period of time, all you do is this one thing, and you have a fit of expression of that one move. Now that could be to develop the style, it could be to develop the technique, it could be to just drill it as well. It could be any one of those things, but it's just really deep. I do practices where, okay, today I'm just going to do isolations for 15 minutes. However, because of my RSI, I like to vary things to prevent muscle fatigue and to ensure that I'm not injuring my body. So I will, depending on how I feel, I have sessions where they're just like intended to be grind sessions where all I'm doing is just trying to grind out the drilling, which I find the most boring, and I don't like them. But who likes grinding? I mean, actually, I don't know. Maybe some people do. I don't mean to speak for other people, but I prefer the sessions where I get to play with expression. So even in the middle of a grind session, I might just have a piece of music that comes on that inspires me, or I'll try to grind to the music, which I think develops style, because what ends up happening is you're grinding out the technique, but you're also doing it to something that makes you move. And because it makes you move, you're moving in a way where you might be doing this head bop. I have more than one move where I do like a particular way that my head bops, and people are like, "Oh, that's so how you do that," It's like, and then it becomes part of your style because you're bopping out while you're grinding, and then you're kind of embedding it into the technique, if that makes sense. So I would do both. I don't think, but that's me because that's what's effective for me, and I've been experimenting with this for decades. That doesn't mean that's what's effective for you. I know some people that I've talked to over the years that they get very little benefit, they claim, over switching between moves, and they like to just dive deep into one thing for an extended period of time. Or like it's the difference between, do you like to practice for 1 hour a week or do you like to practice for 15-minute sessions a week? I mean, as a number. And some people are like, oh, I just want my one session. I get way more out of it because it takes me a while to get into the flow. Of course, my belief is the more times you have to start, the more quickly you will learn how to get into the flow quickly because you've practiced starting again and again, which helps you connect more quickly to it. I think there's benefits to both. Your mileage may vary. I don't think there is one right answer. That'd be like saying every body is the same body, and I think that's just small-minded perspective personally. Your mileage may vary. Yeah, so sometimes going deep can actually cause injury. I know that I've seen people have this problem when they get into flowers, and initially they get really into it. They don't necessarily know the Pilates and the technique to support their shoulders, and then they end up hurting themselves, and they're like, I can't do flowers. I'm like, well, is it that you can't do flowers, or is it that you overdid flowers at some point in the past, and now you have trauma from it, so you're afraid to do them? It's like it's like somebody who starts out with poi with tennis balls, hits themselves in the nuts, and they're like, I can't do poi. I'm like, well, maybe you can, but maybe don't start with like the worst tool ever.